Hello my most favorite peeps, hope you are having a nice Twixmas. I am bringing you the very last video of 2024 on this channel today, and it is gonna be about comparing Edinburgh/British Christmas markets with the, as some people would argue, more authentic ones here on the old continent. I am currently in Prague. I am traveling here for a little trip to see my family over Christmas, as it often is the case, and I have also planned a little day trip to Germany. I've never been to Dresden. I've heard that the Christmas markets there are really something else, so I'm very excited. I'm going to show you kind of a mini vlog from both these cities, and we're going to be comparing how it's different from the ones in Edinburgh, at which I have spent a lot of time over the past couple of years, so I think I am a bit of an expert on this topic. Yeah, we're gonna have a nice festive time for the final days of 2024. Let's go.
Prague has become super popular for Christmas over the last couple of years. Trust me, I have lived here through my share of quiet bank holidays with empty, peaceful streets, which were now replaced by huge crowds of people filling Old Town and the castle area. So, right from the get-go, I am struggling to say that Prague's Christmas markets are in any way more serene or more spiritual than UK's markets and wintertime attractions. But I think that one of the biggest differences is that both Prague and Dresden have a whole range of markets to visit, which means that especially locals tend to spill into the less central ones. In the past, these would be a lot less crowded. Alas, in 2024, I have to say that the amount of both locals and visitors to these less central markets were dramatic. I guess that the word just got out, unfortunately. I will say the less central markets are still a bit less pricey than the central ones. In the city centre, 200 milliliters of mulled wine will set you back about £3. Another difference is that unlike in Edinburgh, the wine usually comes from a specific vineyard, while UK markets usually simply sell pre-made bottled mulled wine. I really liked that the stalls had such a wide range of festive drinks, not just mulled wine and punch, but also mead and liqueurs and all sorts of other more creative options. I also noticed that Prague locals have devised a little month-long mulled wine hopping tour, so you could try multiple vineyards in multiple locations and do a little taste test. The food is mostly quite familiar to the Central European palate. You have the quintessential sausage and the Hungarian chimney cake, which, by the way, as a Czech person, I always felt like it is actually a Christmas market staple in Prague, and I have 30+ year history of going to these in Prague, so I am not huge on hating on the chimney cake just because they're not like 100% authentic. You might also run into some Slovakian cheeses or Czech-filled dumplings and gingerbread. On the Old Town Square, I noticed some stalls leaning more into like a French direction, which was odd, like, snails and champagne. This was new to me. Goods-wise, there is a lot of decoration to be bought: cookie cutters, frankincense, ironwork, and a couple of souvenir stands. Further from the center, you will find more gift items like, bookbinder and basket maker stalls. You won't really find any small designers or illustrators represented at these markets, which is most likely due to the city having tight rules on the types of vendors allowed to trade at Prague Christmas markets. Overall, most Prague markets were quite spacious, which was a bit of a double-edged sword. Unlike Edinburgh and to some extent also Dresden, I felt the least packed in with other people here, and there were kind of always multiple directions to choose, plus the markets themselves are not in any way fenced up, so you can always step out and you will have multiple ways of doing this. Downside being that sometimes when it's quieter they just feel a bit, I don't know, not as festive, I guess. Like there's just like too much space, they are too spread out, and some of the little stalls I think were not designed in the most festive way. Curious to hear what you think.
And so we made it all the way from Prague to Dresden, which is just over 2 hours on train, which is what I took this morning from kind of the area where my sister lives, because there are actually 2 stops that you can take the train from Prague, so that was practical for me because I saved myself some morning time. And I'm already kind of regretting that I am only here for the markets because, for example, right now I have walked up onto the upper area of the Zwinger, which is this Baroque building. There's a museum in it. There seems to be quite a lot of sort of art and history going on in Dresden that I think very much deserves being explored, but I just don't have the time for it because this is just a day trip. We are mostly here to explore the Christmas market. First time for me, maybe first time for you, and we are gonna see what it's all about, and we're gonna compare it to the one in Edinburgh, because this is the actual German one, which I feel like the Edinburgh one, and honestly all of the UK ones are always trying to emulate, so that's gonna be interesting. Let's go.
Oh, Dresden, the city with so many markets, I was genuinely starting to get lost. I mean, this was my first ever time in Dresden, so I would have likely gotten lost anyway, but Dresden just pops a big Christmas market onto every piece of communal space there is, so it can become a bit confusing, especially because they are very similar and really close to each other. I will say that one of them really stood out to me. That was the medieval style market. My mom told me that 2 years ago she had to pay to get in, but that wasn't the case for me. Maybe it's just because I traveled on a weekday and not on a weekend. There was some overlap with the other markets here, for sure, but the atmosphere was really special. I ran into a palm reader and even a little medieval spa, which kind of a little bit unhinged, but lovely and fun to look at. Overall, I think this is what I would love to see more of in Scotland and England. I mean, Scotland has such a huge medieval vibe to it already and such great spaces for a pop-up like this, so it feels like such a lost opportunity. Just like at the Prague markets, over here you can also find a huge range of festive drinks. Be prepared to pay a couple of euros as a returnable fee. Usually it's about 4 euros, but of course this means that you are getting a hot drink in a souvenir mug, so you can keep the mug for 4 euros, about 3.30 in the good old GBP. It's not that much. But it is something to keep in mind, because this is likely one of the reasons why many of Dresden's stall holders haven't quite started taking card payments yet. Food here was really quite interesting to me, because it was just quite different and filled with traditional German fare. You will find a hand-brought, sort of a stuffed warm bread. There was a lot of sort of garlic bread stations, sausages, potato pancakes, and myself, I actually went for a venison goulash soup, which was nice and warming and full of veggies and mushrooms, and also some of these quark balls, as my Central European urges to ingest quark were starting to really take over. You will also find some other kind of Central European food options. I did notice there was quite a lot of langos and also, once again, the chimney cake from Hungary. One thing you shouldn't miss at the markets is getting a piece of the traditional Dresden stollen. This was genuinely the nicest stollen I've tried in my life, with not too sweet marzipan, moist and buttery, and just so luxurious. All of the local bakers seemed to have their stalls at Dresden markets, but I'm sure you will not go wrong with picking any of them. Also, I'm gonna note that within the old town, there weren't really any big attractions/rides. There was just a really cute sort of double-decker carousel and this Ferris wheel, which also was like really dinky and very kind of antique feeling. I really loved that because I am not a big fan of combining like traditional Christmassy vibe with like a death drop sort of thrill ride. That reads a bit strange to me. However, I will say that within Dresden overall, there seemed to be one market across the river that seemed to have much larger rides, so I think that would be probably the closest those markets get to the ones we have in Edinburgh.
Okay, so I am back home, back in Edinburgh with my husband and my cat, who hopefully is gonna stick around for your visual pleasure. Now, you know, now that I have said it out loud that I actually quite enjoy having him here, he will probably leave within like 10 seconds. I'm not wearing my watch.
And he's gone.
What? It is now time to actually fully compare the UK-based markets, by which, obviously from my perspective, I mean mostly Edinburgh and maybe even a little bit of Glaswegian markets. I am not gonna insert like a full vlog from Edinburgh markets here or Glasgow markets. I do have full videos on that on this channel. Do check them out if you do want to kind of have like a proper deep dive into Scottish Christmas markets. I think that there are four main pain points that people do have with UK's Christmas markets. First one being it is just expensive, which I cannot fight with because having visited the Prague ones and the Dresden ones, they are noticeably cheaper, but I think you simply cannot make that argument without also appreciating the fact that both Germany and Czech Republic are simply cheaper places to live in general. Obviously Czech Republic more noticeably so. Things like sausages, you know, at these markets, from what I remember, exchanged from euros, it would be like £3 to £4 per a nice German sausage. Same thing in Czech Republic. I think over there it would be like £2.50 to £3.50 depending on where you're buying it. However, Simon pointed out to me that that's to be expected because these are German/Central European sausages. But Britain, in my opinion, actually makes some of the best sausages I've ever had. I've said it before and I'm gonna say it again. One of my favorite things about just like Britain's wider cuisine, like culinary tradition, is that the sausages here are excellent. Like, you know, in Europe, there's a lot of kind of smokiness and fattiness, but here you get all like the sort of herbs and stuff, and like it's like a whole new world of sausage. So I feel like this should not be an excuse. The other problem people often have when I read their opinions in my comment section or in Google map reviews is just the crowdedness. And if you remember earlier in the video, I did say that especially some of the Prague markets are actually quite spacious and you do get quite a lot of different routes to take, which is nice, but on days or like during daytimes when it's not busy, it feels a bit weird. Maybe I have just been so conditioned to expect the crowds that now when I find myself at a market that's like half empty and there's kind of all of this extra space for the later day crowds, I just feel like, is this even festive anymore? Maybe that's a problem with me. That is a me issue, but I don't know. I think that there's like a nice sort of middle ground there, which I would say is what I've experienced in Dresden, because, you know, there isn't any sort of like one-way system. In Edinburgh specifically, our main sort of market bit, which is the sort of like east part of Prince's Gardens, you later in the day when it gets busy, you do have to start kind of sort of shepherding, sheep herding people from like point A to point B. There is very little sort of option to maybe like at a couple of places there's like a little loop-de-loop and that's it. Otherwise you kind of have to follow the crowd, which I feel like to anyone is just like not pleasant. And I just feel like that's something that, you know, is only fixable by moving the markets to a different area. I can see how like the organizers of Christmas markets here in Edinburgh are trying to experiment with things a little bit. Last year we did have markets on George Street, and that was very open and very kind of flexible in the way you could explore, you know, the market stalls. And this year we got a couple of those extra stalls kind of at the bottom of the park, which also felt a bit more kind of breathable and just like a bit more relaxed, but there was still that sort of one-way point A to point B entry exit system. However, I am gonna say that looking at some of the markets down in England, specifically in Lincoln, where last year they have permanently closed the Christmas markets because with the amount of people visiting them, they just didn't feel like it was safe for them any longer. They just couldn't guarantee safety for everyone involved. And I feel like here in Edinburgh we're kind of getting to that point also. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen. Like maybe eventually it will have to move somewhere else simply because of like fire safety and just general safety. Some people also like to say that there is overpriced tat at the markets. I don't think that is true. I think that at every market everywhere around the world, from what I've seen so far, you will find a little bit of, like, there will always be like one or two stalls where you're kind of thinking like, did this person make it? And, you know, I like to err on the side of trust. I do know that the organizers here in Edinburgh do care about this a lot. Also, I think that sometimes I hate the argument when someone points a product out and says, I also found this on Temu. Well, guess what? Like, on Temu, the whole point of Temu is that they create knockoff products of things that sell in like regular stores and markets. But one last thing I'm going to mention before I move to the last pain point is that I did notice some sort of tatty stalls even in Dresden, which arguably was like the most authentic feeling place to go for Christmas markets. So even there, usually when you have like markets that are actually more for locals than they are for visitors, you know, they sometimes do sell kind of like little sort of tatty toys and things like that, which are noticeably low quality, and I think that they mostly stock them because locals come to the markets with kids and they just want to buy them something small to appease them, to shut them up, if you will. So yeah, this is an issue everywhere, and I think you just have to not let like one stall bother you too much. And one last thing is the whole question of authenticity. Obviously, if you go to Germany and, you know, actual Germany, then a German market will feel the most authentic. From what I know, here in the UK, German Christmas markets is something that has been introduced to the sort of local culture in the 1980s. And to me personally, I feel like living here for the past 12 years, I have lost count by this point, I did see a bit of a shift, even just in that decade plus. I have seen a shift from something that did feel like it really was pushing for a very German feel and look, and even, you know, yeah, like you would have like German language around. Nowadays, you don't really have that. I think that in Edinburgh, the markets are moving towards kind of like a strange mix almost, because visually it is obviously still very kind of, there is that sort of like German market aesthetic. I think we have all internalized that is the quintessential look for Christmas markets. However, I think that a lot of the stuff that is sold there and that is done there is kind of ours now. I do like that Edinburgh markets do have like local illustrators and makers. That is one of my favorite sort of elements at Edinburgh markets, that they do try to keep some of the stalls available to kind of like small independent makers and, you know, manufacturers sellers. I think that is super valuable and lovely. The other markets did not seem to do nearly as much of that when it came to people making anything beyond like baked goods, mulled wine, and ironwork. So I think that's quite nice, that's quite refreshing. However, again, to go back to the Dresden markets and specifically the one that was kind of medieval, I think I have a vision. I have a vision where we keep this market that we have here, because like I think that's one of the problems, that we only have this like one big centralized one, and then there's like little satellites that still belong to the same organizers, which, you know, they're lovely, but I think they're like a little bit of healthy competition. Specifically, like a little kind of almost like a Ren fair. Think like a Christmassy Ren fair. I am obsessed with the idea of a Christmassy Ren fair. We need to do that. Like, someone like send me an email. We're gonna organize a Christmas Ren fair. It's gonna run for like 4 weeks, and there's gonna be like hot, hot men in medieval costumes. So Simon, I think Simon is checking if I'm going red. I just think that obviously, okay, so Scotland, the Scottish Christmas traditions are actually more sort of New Year's, you know, Hogmanay centric. We all know that by this point. England does have more of a sort of traditional Christmas. And then, you know, you have like Wales and their crazy, spooky horsehead monster ghost. There's just like so much to enjoy that's based on, you know, these islands, that I would love to bring to a more like a folksy market. I think that would be really fun. I think a lot of people do not actually want that, which is why I think like it would be so nice to have 2 markets where, you know, one does one thing, one does the old, you know, the sort of more of a drinking and partying and going on a thrill ride thing. I think then we would truly reach the perfect balance of what we can get for Christmas time. Anyway, I hope you agree, but if you do not agree, I would love to hear what you think, because obviously this video was supposed to bring up a bit of a discourse, because everyone has different opinions on how Edinburgh, Scotland and wider UK do their Christmas markets, especially compared to European markets. If you've been to any other European markets, I'd love to know which one was your favorite. I'd love to know what you think of the ones we have here and how you would make them better. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. I'm gonna finish shooting this, I'm gonna edit this, it's gonna go out, hopefully someone's still gonna watch this, hopefully most of you have not totally lost your Christmassy spark by now. I guess that takes me to a point where I'm gonna thank you for coming to my channel, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this video. That probably means that you are an actual supporter of this channel. Maybe you are even my patron. Don't forget, I have a Patreon. This is the address. You do get an extra video most months, sometimes a bit late like this month, but they still happen, I promise. You also get free merch sent to you every 3 months, stuff like that. Good stuff for anyone who enjoys this face and this channel and all of this content. You can also say hi to me on Instagram, kakibot and kakiblog, for illustrations and kind of like yapping about video games a lot, and for photography and, you know, shots of Edinburgh and just kind of like tips on where to eat, stuff like that. Okay, it's been a good year. Thank you for being here for me. Thank you for watching all of this stuff, and I shall see you soon.